my name is James Sidley. I am here with Full Potential Learning Academy to go over the essential grammar skills that you'll need on the SAT and ACT. Today, our first lecture will be covering subject-verb disagreement. Today we'll be going over what subject-verb disagreement is, as well as why it's wrong in grammar. We'll also be going some scenarios, such as tricky singulars and plurals, interrupters, inverted sentences, and finally some practice to help you master what you learned today. Subject-verb disagreement is what happens when the subject and the verb disagree in number. For example, all of the eggplant were used is incorrect. All of is singular thanks to the word eggplant. Were is plural, but should be singular. So, were can be changed to was to make it correct, and it reads, all the eggplant was used. So that way they agree in number. Pride and Prejudice are my favorite novel is also incorrect, because Pride and Prejudice is a singular title. Ergo, Pride and Prejudice is my favorite novel is correct. Of course, finding subject-verb disagreements won't be so cut and dry all the time. When that happens, you probably run into a tricky singular or plural. Tricky singulars are subjects that appear not to be the subjects, but are the subject and are thusly easier to sneak subject-verb disagreements by. Pause the video now and study a list for a moment. You can check any of these singulars for subject-verb disagreements by replacing them with the word it. Singular and plural word pairs are singular or plural based on the word that follows. For example, all of the eggplant is singular, but if we change eggplant to eggplants, it'll read all of the eggplants, and now it's plural. By studying these, you'll have a better chance of improving on SVD errors. Of course, in some scenarios, you might run into words you usually hear in one form when in actuality they have two forms. Take a moment to study this brief list to understand that some words can usually have tricky forms. When you come across some words like these, you can check for SVD errors by replacing the word here with them to understand if they have SVD errors or not. Of course, there's more than one way to hide particularly nasty subject-verb disagreement errors. Interrupters are stances in a sentence to provide additional, but ultimately not needed, information in a sentence. For example, Sam and Bob plays is incorrect because Sam and Bob plays should be Sam and Bob play because it's focusing on Sam and Bob. However, when we add an interrupter, Sam as well as Bob plays in the street, that's correct. The key thing here is that with the commas, as well as Bob, it becomes an interrupter. So Sam is still a singular subject even with the interrupter. So Sam plays is singular, and that is why it is correct. Take a moment now to pause the video and study the short list on the left to see a good number of interrupters. Sometimes you'll find subject-verb disagreement errors in what are called inverted sentences, which is when the verb actually comes before the subject. To check for subject-verb disagreements, simply reinvert the sentence moving the subject back in front of the verb. For example, absent from the article were any mention of the director's previous Broadway failures. That is inverted. Uninverted, it reads something like this. Any mention of the director's previous Broadway failures were absent from the article. We see we need to change the were to was, so that way we can correct the subject-verb disagreement errors. And in doing so, we can see that uninverting inverted sentences and could improve our score. Here are a number of examples to solve for SVD errors after going through the basics of solving for them. On the left are some subject-verb disagreement errors, and on the right is how to solve for them. For example, the flock of geese were startled by a shotgun blast. Now, initially, flock of geese sounds plural, but in truth, we're focusing on the flock itself as a whole. So, the solution to fixing it is to change were to was, and ergo, we see that the flock of geese was startled by the shotgun blast. The similar subject below, neither the twins are allergic, is incorrect. Neither is the subject, so we must say neither of the twins is allergic to the medicine. And finally, the last sentence, much of what I hear in that lecture goes in one ear and out the other. Subject here is much. So we change much to singular from go to goes, and that's how you correct the SVD error for that. These are just a few of the examples that you'll see on SAT exams and some of the practice up ahead that we'll be practicing on next slide. Here's some subject-verb disagreement practice now. There is 100 people here, none of the roasts were eaten, and how important is your strength training and diet to your daily routine? These are all wrong in some regard. Feel free to try out some practice. It's okay if you don't do it perfectly the first time, but so long as you understand how to practice for SVD, this will be worth it. Feel free to pause the video now and give it a shot. Here are the answers now to the subject-verb disagreement errors practice that we have tried out now. There is 100 people should be changed to there are 100 people because 100 people is plural because it's not focusing on a group, it's focusing on how many people there are. None of the roasts should be changed to was eaten because the roast itself is singular because of also the none, which is also singular. And how important are your strength training and diet to your daily routine is plural because it's talking about strength training and diet as two separate entities. These are the answers, and I hope you've learned from them, and I hope you have done well on your practice. Yeah. By focusing on subjects and verbs in a sentence, you will be able to distinguish which sentences have subject-verb disagreements and which don't, which will help improve your score overall. Thank you for listening to this lecture. Next time, we will focus on trimming sentences and the role subject-verb disagreement errors play in trimming sentences, as well as how trimming sentences will help improve your score. Thank you for listening. Teach you next time. The material provided during this lecture was provided by the McGraw-Hill SAT book, Chapter 15, Essential Grammar Skills. We hope you enjoyed.